Hey, Denver, it's Paul. I'm a producer on the show, and I'm here with a special weekend bonus episode. This is the second installment of our spin-off podcast series, Lauren Boebert Can't Lose. If you missed the first one, don't worry about it too much. I think this will still be a perfectly good place to jump in because we tell the story of how Boebert became the avatar of MAGA values that we know her as today. Of course, the first one we're still very proud of, and if you like this one, you should still go back and listen to it if you haven't. But this one is this one was fun. It's kind of a road trip. Hope you like it. Hey, a warning before we start. This episode features both explicit language and themes.
Five years ago, no one knew the name Lauren Boebert.
At the time, I was helping out with some political coverage, and the presidential race was starting to ramp up on the Democratic side for who was going to take on Donald Trump.
This is John Murray. He's currently a senior editor at the Denver Post, but back in the fall of 2019, he was just a reporter who got an assignment to go cover a rally.
And so I went out to cover Beto O'Rourke for the hot flash where he was running for the Democratic nomination.
Beto O'Rourke was an energetic young Democrat who had just shocked the country when he almost unseated the Republican incumbent Ted Cruz in the Texas Senate race of 2018. The next year, he tried to make a name for himself on the national stage with a presidential campaign.
Because I want to make sure that we deliver. And what I have found is that your sentiment, the words that I've been saying.
He was out in Aurora, kind of on the steps of City Hall, a stone's throw from the movie theater where the shooting had happened back in 2012.
John is talking about the Aurora Theater shooting, where a heavily armed young man entered the Century 16 Theater in our neighboring city of Aurora during a midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises. According to the New York Times, he carried a, quote, semi-automatic variation of the military's M16 rifle, a pump-action 12-gauge shotgun, and at least one .40 caliber semi-automatic pistol. He killed 12 people in that theater and injured 70 more.
And that mother watched her bleed to death over the course of an hour.
7 years later, Beto was making gun control a central issue in his campaign.
Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15, your AK-47. We're not going to allow it to be used against our fellow Americans anymore.
So before the rally, I was sort of scoping out the crowd, like, hey, who's there? And so I was kind of trolling around the crowd outside the Aurora City Hall. And
John later reported that some of the family members of the victims of the theater shooting were in attendance, alongside a crowd of Beto supporters. But there was also a woman there who stood out.
She caught my eye, and so I went up and started chatting with her and asked her who she was, and saw that she had a gun on her hip, which certainly stood out in that crowd, which, 90-something% of them were probably anti-gun advocates. So, clearly this woman was here to make a point. So I asked her about that. And she, of course, started going off. She was very well practiced with her lines. And so she, said, I'm here. I'm going to tell Beto O'Rourke that there's no way in hell he's going to take my guns. And I want to deliver that message to him. And I'm thinking, well, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, right. But, sure enough, later on, she did deliver that message to him.
Hello, thank you so much for taking my question. I was one of the gun-owning Americans that heard your speech and heard what you had to say regarding, hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15s and your AR. And
Let's be respectful. Let's be respectful.
The national press was following Beto's campaign, and this footage caught fire. The story ran on Fox News the next day with the headline, "Woman Confronts Beto on Gun Confiscation at Town Hall." That woman wasn't even a politician at the time, but she sure had a knack for creating viral moments.
Well, I am here to say, hell no, you're not. So with that, I would like to know how you intend to legislate evil, because it is not the gun, it is the heart of the man that does that. We all have stories, excuse me.
She's poised, she's confident, she's ready when the rest of the audience turns on her.
Let's allow her to finish, please.
We can all have these stories. We all have the experiences. I was living in Aurora during Columbine. I had just recently moved when the Aurora shootings happened, yet I have very close ties here. Yet all of those people were there defenseless. They had no way to defend themselves against a crazed shooter.
She gave the cameras exactly what they wanted, and John saw it too. This was the moment Lauren Boebert, just a restaurateur from Rifle, Colorado, showed her star quality.
It's okay. Please allow her to finish.
I don't have my AR-15 today. I have my Glock.
Well, you shouldn't have it.
Don't worry, sir. I have your back. Anyway.
You cover a lot of politicians, and when they're first starting out, they, are very wooden and they don't have that sort of charisma about them. They're not guys who just walk into a room and instantly, people pay attention to, want to know what they want to say. Lauren Boebert, whether you agree with her or not, she's one of those people that she starts talking, and you might argue over whether what she says is something that you consider highly intelligent or compelling. There's certainly a lot of disagreement about that, depending on people's political views. But that's what I mean by star quality.
2 months after she confronted Beto O'Rourke, Lauren Boebert announced her first run for Congress. She campaigned her ass off during the pandemic, without a mask, and left her opponents in the dust. That November, she won. And despite all the controversies and all the liberals that despise her, she has pretty much not stopped winning since that showdown in Aurora. So where did this gun-toting, charismatic avatar of MAGA values come from? Exactly what or who does she represent? In today's episode, we go to Rifle, Colorado to find out how Boebert became Boebert. I'm Bree Davies, host of the daily news podcast CityCast Denver, and as usual, I'm here with my producer, Paul Caroli.
Bree, we finally get to talk about our trip to Rifle.
We do, finally. Probably like a month ago, you and me and our buddy Joshua Emerson, who's been helping out on this series, woke up at dawn, and then we drove west from Denver across the Continental Divide to the western slope of the Rocky Mountains.
Tell you what, that quick trip's got a lot of flavors of Slurpees.
They do. Too many all the time.
Lauren Boebert herself made this exact same drive about 20 years ago. See, Boebert was born in Florida to a single mom. When she was a kid, her mom had a string of bad boyfriends that took them back and forth to live in Colorado, then back in Florida, then back in Colorado, where they lived just outside Denver in the city of Aurora. But life was hard in Colorado in those early years. Lauren Boebert has talked about being on food stamps at one point and has said that her mom's boyfriend, Mike, was occasionally violent. Eventually, though, Mike cleaned up his act and got a job in Aspen. So they moved to a much more affordable area about an hour away, outside a town named after a gun, where Paul had prepared something to mark the occasion.
So we just pulled up here in Rifle, Colorado, and I thought it'd be nice for the occasion to read a short excerpt from Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's book, My American Life.
Yes, make sure you get that dually rolling by.
This is from Chapter 11. If you're looking to experience the Western way of life, head to Rifle, Colorado. Rifle is where real cowboys still work. Sometimes you can see one riding his horse along the road when you drive by. Can we see one now?
We could not.
But we saw a lot of cars. Rifle has got 2 main streets and a few shops and restaurants, then a bunch of box stores and strip malls spreading out across this beautiful, lush valley. The Colorado River flows past the town along the highway, which is probably why the valley was so prosperous for cattle ranchers in the early 20th century. Oil and gas is by far the biggest employer in the county now, and has been since before Boebert showed up.
I have to say, there's a lot more people around than I expected.
Let's talk to some of them. What's your name?
Deb Grizzle.
Nice to meet you, Deb. My name's Paul.
Hi, Paul. Nice.
Did you vote for Congresswoman Boebert?
Oh, can I cuss?
You sure can.
Hell no.
Why not?
She brought so much divisiveness into the community. I guess she'd been here a while. I didn't know her until she started running. And I had patronized her restaurant before she decided to become political. So I didn't have anything against her until she started politicking.
The restaurant Deb is talking about is Shooter's Grill, the place Boebert and her ex-husband Jason opened in 2013. What was she like before she got political?
From what I hear, she was really colorful, a rebellious teenager. And
was it a good restaurant?
No.
Boebert writes in her book about getting a job while she was still in high school. But the real story of her teen years, according to her, is that she learned how to rely on herself.
All right, Bree, we're outside a very important place in Congresswoman Lauren Boebert's young life. Where are we?
McDonald's, her seminal job that taught her about customer service.
Why was this place important to her?
This is where she says she learned how to talk to people, how to be not personable, but it seems like it was very foundational to her experience in the world. In the book, she says that she worked here, she really liked it, but I think she asked for a raise and they didn't give her one. And then she was at the Burger King that was nearby. I think it's closed right now. And they offered her 25 cents more. So she went and worked there, but she felt that she felt that her coworkers at Burger King didn't work as hard as she did, and she didn't feel the work ethic was as strong. So she came back to the McDonald's and actually asked for a raise. And got it. So it was sort of also her learning how to advocate for herself, it sounds like. But it's a theme throughout the book. It's things that she learned this is what I learned at McDonald's kind of thing. But the Burger King is important because while she was there, only for maybe a couple months is where she met her husband. He was a customer. So in my world, that would mean the universe put you there for a reason. She could meet her husband. So Lauren Boebert was my friend. That's what I would tell her.
Hollywood couldn't have scripted it better, is something she literally wrote in her book. Quote, like a moment straight from a movie. You know, where the man among men delivers the perfect line and the gal goes weak at the knees. This dreamy, rugged stud approached, calmly and confidently, and directly asked me, "What are we doing later?"
Jason Boebert had grown up in Las Vegas and moved to Rifle to work on the natural gas rigs. That's when he walked into that Burger King with his buds and talked to the 16-year-old girl behind the counter. He was 22. Within a few years of meeting, they had a couple kids, and she was working for the same natural gas company he did.
But then, according to her book, disaster struck. Quote, in 2012, thanks to President Obama and Colorado Democrats who were pushing for highly restrictive energy extraction regulations, the local economy was about to go over a cliff. Now, I did fact check that, and it seems like a bit of an exaggeration. Data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration shows that natural gas production in Colorado did dip in 2013, but it's been on an upward trajectory since the 80s. Regardless of the circumstances, though, Jason didn't respond to my interview request, so all I know for sure is that he lost his job. Lauren writes that he had to take one of the plentiful oil and gas jobs in Texas to keep the young family afloat. He'd work in Texas for 2 weeks, then come back to Rifle for 2 weeks, on and off, on and off.
Laura does not explain why she didn't want to just move the family to Texas. She just says that she thought it might be a good idea to get a job and be productive. She had some restaurant experience from McDonald's and Burger King, so they bought an old restaurant on the main drag in Rifle, remodeled it, and gave it a theme to play on the town's name.
Did you ever eat at Shooters?
No, I never did.
Charles Ashby is a political reporter at Western Colorado's premier newspaper, the Grand Junction Daily Sentinel. He's reported on politics all over this state, but especially the rural western half, for more than 45 years. Why would you not go? How could you not?
I don't go to lunch there. It's too far away. No.
It's like an hour down the road.
Yeah, well, that's my whole lunch hour right there.
We stopped by the Daily Sentinel's giant and mostly empty office while we were in the area because an hour drive is sometimes really worth it, Charles. No, I feel like what you're saying is that's just like regular here.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be out of the ordinary. But maybe what was out of the ordinary was her getting some negative attention from outsiders who other people here already resented.
Yeah, but that wasn't true at that time. That didn't happen until later.
She did start getting attention like 2014, though. I remember that was the first round of national stories about shooters.
Right.
And then 2019, there was another round.
But there was a novelty at that time. I mean, she wasn't a politician. She wasn't a candidate. It was just a novelty. It was just, okay, that's the Old West for you. You know, it's like, whatever.
The gun-themed restaurant was popular enough with locals who'd grown up with guns. Based on the Yelp reviews, people liked the theme menu items like the Swiss & Wesson burger and the locked and loaded nachos, and most of them seemed to like the friendly mom running the show, too. At least one Yelp user, who gave Shooters a 1-star review, warned other people of color to steer clear. But other than that, seemed pretty popular.
You're about to enter a restaurant where you probably want to make sure to tip well.
This is a clip from ABC News in July of 2014, the first time Lauren Boebert was the story.
Almost all the waitresses pack heat, publicly and proudly. They say it makes them safer, and that's apparently been good for business, and probably bad for anyone thinking about dining and dashing.
The exact origin of shooter servers wearing guns on their hips has been disputed, so it's worth sharing more. Boebert writes in her book that one day she went into work and, quote, people were abuzz with the news that, quote, a man had been brutally beaten near shooters and died. So she says she had to protect herself, and she went to the pawn shop, learned about open carry, and bought a 5-shot revolver. Years later, the Colorado Sun reported that the Rifle Police Department did investigate a death on August 22nd, 2013 as a possible homicide. But an autopsy later determined that the man died of a drug overdose. Either way, Lauren says it was the moment that changed her life forever because it led to attention like this.
Every morning, Lauren Boebert starts the day with some blush, fixes her near-perfect hair, and puts on her sparkly belt. But she is not fully dressed without her bullets and her 9mm semi-automatic.
All the press coverage of shooters made it the kind of place you'd want to be seen, especially if you were campaigning for office and trying to make a statement about your stance on the Second Amendment, which is how Republican gubernatorial candidate Bob Beaupre found himself at shooters in 2014.
I'm Bob Beaupre, Colorado native, former dairy farmer, real estate developer, community banker, member of Congress, and now happily a grandfather and bison rancher.
Bob Beaupre is one of the last great leaders of the old version of the Colorado GOP, before Boebert's big MAGA wave came along. He cared more about small government than owning the libs, and he lost 2 races for governor in 2006 and 2014. He spoke to me a few weeks ago from his ranch at an undisclosed location in northern Colorado.
I don't know the intricate details of how the invitation came, but I was told that we had an invitation and event scheduled at Shooter's Restaurant, and was told it was a kind of a fun place, typical small town restaurant. But Lauren welcomed us. It was over the noon hour. I don't know if they had done a little bit of groundwork and helped pack the place or not, but it was packed. And visited with Lauren for a little while and went table to table, and we had lunch there as well. Found it very enjoyable. She was pleasant, effervescent, chatty and fun. I suppose we were there probably an hour start to finish and left.
Beaupre ended up losing that election in 2014, in part because he and the rest of the old guard in the Republican Party were still struggling to appeal to a new kind of conservative voter. More and more of the folks eating in places like Shooters were angry at President Obama and the Dems. They wanted communities like Rifle to be free of government regulations, like the one that supposedly cost Jason Boebert his natural gas job.
Politics has gotten very corrosive, very chaotic, very personal.
He told me he'd been trying to figure out how things changed since he first ran for governor in 2006, which was just as both Democrats and Republicans were turning on the Iraq War. He said the only thing he knew for sure was the exact moment he knew something very big was happening in western Colorado. It was when his pollster came back to him one day with a new batch of numbers.
I asked him, what'd you find? And his answer was a lot of angry people. Again, that didn't surprise me. I said, the next question, okay, Dave, how do we cut through it? And there was silence. And finally, he came back on the line and he said, I don't know. And he further went on and said, Bob, I haven't said that since Watergate. I don't know.
This place and the politics and how they were changing, the conservative movement really changed at this time because there was the Tea Party that came in 2010,
right?
But then that's sort of morphed into this Trump movement.
Right.
What did that look like here on the Western Slope?
The same way it looked everywhere else. It was no different here. So there are people who were just, I don't know, they just started to hate their institutions. I can't figure it out because they don't like journalism any more than they like their government. And, they get mad at me because they think that I'm working with the government. And that's just ridiculous because I got into this business because I don't trust the government. I'm with you. But they don't seem to believe that. And some people think that we're paid by the government, which is utterly ridiculous. Anyway, so it's no different here than, just because we're not where you live doesn't mean we're different. We're the same.
After seeing the sights and rifle for ourselves, Paul demanded that the three of us go eat at Shooters, even though it closed a couple years ago. So Paul made us go eat at the Mexican restaurant that took its place instead.
Bree, I'm finally ready to admit that eating a plate of not great enchiladas did not help me achieve any new insight or understanding. But at the time, I was worried we were going to leave without getting any deeper than that. We'd already taken a picture of the rifle on the street signs, but that's when our collaborator Joshua noticed something.
There's a gun shop right across the street that's next to a
pawn shop and gun store?
Yeah, that one right there.
I wonder if this is the exact same pawn shop where she bought the gun that she wore on her thigh.
It could be.
The three of us went in to see if we could talk to the owner.
We're working on a story about Lauren Boebert.
There were a few other people in there, and the guy behind the counter told me they didn't have time for an interview.
Oh, I wouldn't have any time with everything going on with Colorado laws and guns. We're crazy busy, I'm sorry.
It wasn't immediately clear what he meant, since the shop wasn't exactly slammed. But on the way out, I grabbed a flyer for an upcoming rally that seemed to have some answers.
What's it say on there?
The Rocky Mountain gun owners, the anti-gun Democrats have revealed their plans to disarm Colorado.
None of us realized this, but the exact same week we were in Rifle, the Democrats in control of the state legislature had been debating a bill to ban so-called assault weapons. They'd been talking about a ban for years, but this year's bill had more support than ever, and it advanced further than it had ever gone.
I'm sure it's also an increase in sales for assault weapons anytime, because the fear is one of the best things you can use to try to sell an item. And so if they're like, hey, they're going to ban assault weapons, get them now instead of later, you know? And so I'm sure he is busy because of the legislation.
The connection I'm seeing here is this is the exact same fear, or maybe just the exact same emotion that she tapped into when she went out to Denver to face off with Beto.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like people criticize her for being all like aesthetic.
What politician isn't aesthetic?
Well, that's what I'm saying. She's not just aesthetic, because she had a policy that she cared about that resonated with people in her community.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Lauren writes in her book about how important it was to her as a business owner that Shooters was a safe place to talk about issues of the day. So over the years, as the restaurant's reputation grew, she was more exposed to the politics of her community. And a few years later, just months before she confronted Beto O'Rourke, some of her customers were talking about a, quote, scheme cooked up by the liberals in Denver. So she did her research and got involved in a signature gathering campaign. Turns out her experience dealing with the press converted right into politics, and she collected the second most signatures in the state.
So a few months later, when Beto O'Rourke said hell yes, he was going to take people's AR-15s, AK-47s, and other weapons designed for military use, she says she was pissed.
Quote, I lived in Aurora as a kid, and now some tyrannical candidate was headed there to tell me I shouldn't have the right to defend myself with a gun. I decided to tell him how I felt.
I am here to say hell no, you're not. So with that, I would like to know how you intend to...
And then came all the attention and Fox News, and a few weeks later, she announced her campaign for Congress.
So, how did she convince voters to pick her over the incumbent who already won President Trump's endorsement? That's right after this break.
So I think that I first heard about Lauren Boebert the day that she confronted Beto O'Rourke outside Aurora City Hall.
This is 9 News anchor Kyle Clark. He's kind of a celebrity newsman around Denver.
And folks were like, who's the woman who's yelling at Beto O'Rourke? And then it's like, oh, she owns this place in Rifle called Shooter's Grill, where the staff walks around open carrying and serving you food. And it's like, all right, that tracks, right? That tracks. Okay, all right, that's cool.
Boebert announced she was running to represent Rifle, Grand Junction, and the rest of Colorado's 3rd District in Congress, just 7 months before the Republican primary. And that's the vote that mattered. The 3rd district at this time was a heavily Republican-leaning district, so whoever won the Republican primary was seen as a shoo-in. Her toughest opponent in that primary was the venerable Scott Tipton, who first won the seat in the Tea Party wave of 2010 and had held it ever since.
So I saw that she announced her campaign for Congress, and I saw that it was getting immediate traction in conservative media circles, meaning that she had already planted the seeds with those groups, or other people around her had done that, and they were there to mobilize and boost her campaign from the start. So I thought this could actually be a fairly serious primary challenge. Now, again, we're talking about Scott Tipton. He's a very conservative Republican. He was the co-chair of Trump's campaign in Colorado. And here comes this restaurateur who says that she's going to run to his right as an even more pro-Trump candidate. But Trump had a pretty firm grasp on the party. She clearly had some conservative media folks behind her. So I thought, let's ask her to come in for an interview. And she immediately agreed. We talked the next day.
Joined by Lauren Boebert. She is challenging Republican Congressman Scott Tipton in a GOP primary for Congress to represent Colorado's Western Slope. Thank you for coming in.
Hi, thank you for having me tonight.
Your campaign announcement didn't mention Congressman Tipton by name. It did spend quite a bit of time and space attacking Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York. You running against her, or you running against Scott Tipton?
I'm absolutely running against her. So there is a social narrative that is taking over our country. There's a battle for the heart and soul of our country right now. And I am ready to be the one that steps up for conservative values and takes on AOC. I don't believe that there are many people who can take her on the way that I'll be able to.
What was that like?
It was unlike any interview that I have ever done before in the political sphere, because most people who come into one of those interviews seeking public office want to demonstrate knowledge about the institution or the government that they're seeking to lead, where it was clear that now Congresswoman Boebert did not know a ton about Congress or how it worked, and that she considered that to be somewhat of a badge of honor.
Kind of that outsider thing that
Not just outsider, but literally didn't know how Congress worked.
What made me decide to run for Congress, what made me decide, Lauren, it's time to mount up, was when I heard my congressman say that he was on a committee with Maxine Waters as a chair, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is on that committee, and Rashida Tlaib was on that committee. And this is the new world that we live in, and they direct the ship. And I said, why aren't you directing the ship? Why aren't you the captain? You've been there for 4 terms now, and you want us to rehire you for a 5th. I think it's time somebody else steps up. And I didn't see anyone else stepping up. So I put my life and my family on the line to answer the call.
Well, he doesn't lead that committee. Maxine Waters leads that committee because she's in the majority and Republicans are in the minority. If you were to beat Congressman Tipton, that's just a Republican for a Republican, so that doesn't get you any closer to a Republican majority.
I believe that he could be active and let the people of Colorado know what's going on. He could come back and give us a battle plan and get behind people with conservative values, support them, endorse them, throw campaigns, and really bring an effect, bring an acknowledgement to what's going on to citizens in Colorado.
And any time that there was a lack of knowledge, that simply reinforced her outsider status, that I'm such an outsider, I don't even know how Congress works.
And that's like I guess, attractive to her constituency in some capacity?
I think it clearly was.
So you mentioned that where Scott Tipton was at this point, he was a Trump supporter. It wasn't like she was going against somebody who wasn't also on that same side of things. Did you think she had a chance? I mean, you had an interview with her. Did you think she had a chance against Scott Tipton?
Yeah, I did. That's why I brought her in. Yeah, that's why I asked for her to come in, because I mean, she clearly was tapping into something in the conservative media ecosystem, and clearly there was some discontent with Tipton. If folks were ready to pre-launch her campaign to do this, she had shown the ability to tap into talk radio, which is an animating force on the right. She had shown the ability to for lack of a better word, like make a public scene with the Beto O'Rourke thing. That is something that can be turned into currency in modern politics. So did I know she was going to win? Absolutely not. Did I think she was going to win? No, I don't think so. But I knew that it was likely to be interesting.
What do you think she was tapping into?
I think she was just running as a Trump vessel, right? She was just, Scott Tipton says he loves Donald Trump, but let me show you how much I love Donald Trump. And I think people tapped into that. I think that they loved her rebel image. I think they loved the fact that she was, the purest of outsiders in the sense that she didn't even understand the institution that she wanted to be elected to. One of the first questions that I asked her was, do you just want to go to Congress to fight with AOC? And she's like, yeah. I mean, she was pretty open about the fact that she just wanted to go to fight with AOC. And I think that a lot of folks in the Republican primary loved the idea that their congresswoman could go and fight with AOC, because Scott Tipton wasn't fighting with AOC. He was talking about like water policy and taxes and things like that.
Are there any specific votes that you can point to where you think that Congressman Tipton was on the wrong side of the issue and you would have voted the other way?
I would encourage people to look at his voting record for 2018. I think our congressman forgot who he was for a little bit. I looked him up, and there were some questionable votes, for sure.
Which one specifically?
There was just a lot in reference to spending, Planned Parenthood funding, abortions, it just not conservative values. I believe that my constituents will sleep well at night knowing that I will check off every conservative checkbox that there is, and I want them to hold me
If I could summarize my interview with her, that first interview, it was, I don't know a whole lot about Congress, but I don't like it, and I'm going to get in there and I'm going to mix things up. And I think that really resonated with people.
That's so wild to me because I think about my friends that are in politics. It's so much work. This is not an easy job. It's not a glamorous job by any means. You often are working day in and day out on all kinds. I mean, if you're not doing policy work or, working with other legislators, you have to be out in the community all the time. All the time.
With respect, though, I think that's one way to do politics.
Okay.
And the other way to do politics is to treat it as simply a performative sport that consists of monetizing people's attention and their outrage. And that actually doesn't seem like it's very hard at all, right? There's lots of people who do that online all day. So the idea that there would be electeds that do that, that doesn't strike me as very hard work.
I totally disagree with you about that. I think it's really hard to do that. I think we're all in that business right now.
To monetize outrage and attention?
I think to do it as well as she does, as well as Donald Trump does. I mean, there's not a lot of people that can do it that well, that can create something that can ride a wave to the White House, to Congress.
I don't know. I mean, is this a work ethic question? I mean, I get the sense that it comes fairly easy to her, which is not to denigrate her. Like, people have skills in life, right? And she has the ability to capture and keep people's attention.
Over the course of her campaign, more and more conservatives started paying attention to Lauren Boebert. Especially after the pandemic and the shutdown started in March, she flouted the lockdown orders and kept traveling and meeting people in person across the district, which only made them love her more.
We are wrapping up a victory celebration here in Rifle, Colorado.
In the Republican primary on June 30th, 2020, Boebert defeated Scott Tipton by almost 10 percentage points. And then in November, she beat the Democrat just as badly.
Thank you all for all of your support.
So that's kind of like where our politics are at right now. Like you said, people chose her because they wanted to watch her fight with AOC. Is that a problem, do you think?
I think it's their choice. I think everybody gets to choose their representatives, and then I think we live with the choices that are made.
3 days after Lauren Boebert was sworn in as a member of Congress, Donald Trump held a rally outside the Capitol. He whipped up the crowd with talk of a stolen election, and thousands of his supporters marched up the Capitol steps.
Fuck you, police!
Boebert was inside when the Trump supporters broke into the building, looking for Vice President Mike Pence and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi.
Multiple capital entries! Multiple capital entries!
Boebert tweeted twice during the violence that followed. At 2:17 p.m., she wrote, "We were locked in the House chambers."
Sharpened optics! Missiles!
Then, a few minutes later, in what sounded to many like a message to the MAGA faithful, quote, "The Speaker has been removed from chambers."
This is now effectively a riot.
But what about just the scene? She's walking into 9 News. You did it in person. Tell us physically, what was it like? How did she comport herself?
Oh, she's a super pleasant person. She's a very engaging, very charismatic, I mean, it's the one and only time I've met her in person. she has not been willing to sit down for an interview since then. So everything that I remember about our personal exchanges was very pleasant. I think there was some exchanges we were walking out the door, and I don't report people's exchanges that we talk about going out the door, but something to the lines of like, like that was harder than it needed to be or something like that. And my thought was just, this is going to be a wild ride.
Next time on Lauren Boebert Can't Lose. What happens when someone who has more attitude than experience tries to get something done in Washington?
Any workplace, be it Congress or a bakery, can have a bunch of people who do nothing but like shout and posture each other all day. But like, are you making bread at the end of the day? Like, are you making laws at the end of the day? Or are you just fighting with each other?
It's sexy for somebody to be wearing a gun and doing all that. And to us, that position is worth so much more. We needed so much more.
This has been Lauren Boebert Can't Lose, a production of CityCast Denver, where you can find me and Bree talking every day about the latest news and culture in Denver, Colorado. You can learn more about us and this special series at denver.citycast.fm. See you next time.